I'd like to send a tribute to all the martyrs of the Baha'i faith. Baha'i faith, Baha'i faith, began in 1844 in Iran. And the ideals of the Baha'i faith were so revolutionary and different from the way society of that time, particularly the East, particularly Iran at the time, we're used to that from the very beginning of its announcement, amazing persecution of the adherents of this faith began. There was, in the very beginning, the first 10 years or so actually, there was total slaughter of whoever accepted this faith. Not only slaughter, but most innovating means and ways of torture of the adherents of this faith. Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the faith, who was exiled and as a prisoner in the Ottoman Empire at the time, he sent tablets to all the kings and rulers of the world, including a passage to Nasruddin Shah, the king of Iran, and he sent a tablet asking me about his mission and his vision for the world and all that. And we all know that his mission for the world is oneness of the human race, oneness of religion, equality among races and people, equality between men and women. That many of these things now is accepted by many people of the world, but back then, and particularly back then in Iran, this was quite revolutionary. So they rose against him. And so among these early martyrs of the faith was a young man by the name of Badi, that is shown in this book, who was tortured by Nasruddin Shah's agents in 1870, and then he was put to death. And so this episode continued. You know, for the earlier years of this century, during Pahlavi's regime, although there was continued persecution, but at a much lower pace, it was a lot better for Baha'is. Baha'is were always not involved in politics. Baha'u'llah tells us that you are here to change the hearts of men, to make them more loving and kind and compassionate to the human race, and you don't interfere in politics. But even so, there was periodic persecutions. And so in 1955, there was a fanatic Muslim clergy by the name of Fasafi who rose the fanatics against the faith, and they ultimately came to the beautiful Baha'i center that we had at the time I was 15 years old. They came to the Baha'i center of Tehran and they destroyed it. And strangely enough, the government of Iran sent its most prominent representative, the Timsar Batman Ghalij and Sahim Nasiri, together with this clergy, Fasafi, to destroy the Baha'i center. And then there was violence and a number of Baha'is were killed. But then later on there was international outcry, and within a short period of time the government put a stop to it, and Baha'is lived in relative peace and tranquility for the remaining years until the revolution of 1979. At that point, the government rose against the Baha'is one more time and began absolute violence and persecution of Baha'is, particularly they wanted to what they called cutting the head of Baha'is, and therefore they would round up the prominent Baha'is, members of what we call the National Spiritual Assembly, and some of the local spiritual assembly, and then they would just slaughter them together. They would torture them to recant, and when they did not recant, they would execute them. In 1984, the Baha'is wrote a chronicle of persecution of Baha'is, and what seemed to be the plan of the Persian government to basically try to eliminate the Baha'i faith, which at the time had 300,000 adherents in Iran. It was called Iran's secret program. From that time, that's from basically from 1979 to the present, some 220 or so Baha'is have been tortured and killed in the most brutal manner by the government of Iran, including the current 7 leaders of the Baha'i faith who are in jail, and a number of young Baha'is in Shiraz who are there to serve the poor and teach the villagers who are still incarcerated. And I was going through this booklet, and the booklet which was which came out later, recently, and I wanted to see from these 220 Baha'is or so that have been murdered, have been martyred, as we say, for the faith of Baha'u'llah. How many of them did I know? And let me say that in spite of all this, Baha'u'llah has given us a very difficult mandate, and I'm still struggling with it as a human being. He tells us that we should love these enemies, because these enemies of the faith, for one thing, are promoting the ideas of the Baha'i faith, because the more the world sees this brutality, the more they see how bad those atrocities are. And the other thing is that Abu Baha, the eldest son of Baha'u'llah, the interpreter of Baha'u'llah's writings, tells us that in his words, I guess, Zah Dahan, Shah Dave. If they give you poison, you give them honey. In this manner, it may take a generation, it may take 2 generations, but eventually will change the hearts of men. As we see, the hearts of majority of the people of Iran has changed, and they have understood what Baha'is and Baha'i faith is all about.